Good morning, rise and shine. Guess who's still on California time? Yeah, that's me. Welcome, everyone, to the Green Nurse Podcast, where we bring you hope and inspiration for growth and healing so you can start your day off in an absolutely amazing way with some hugs and nugs of love from us all here. So, I'm going to start the show off with a little video that just inspires me and makes me smile and reminds me why I'm show up every single day. Here we go.
Me change the paradigm of healthcare.
The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I'm the founder of Holistic Caring. We're based here in California, and we do educational programs and case management for patients on how to use cannabis therapeutically as a medicine.
We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high, hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing.
As the founder of Holistic Caring, I basically oversee the whole ship, and what we're doing is progressive education.
Cannabis actually supports all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to either do something or not do something. Because the plant was prohibited, it prevented health professionals, doctors and nurses from learning about cannabis as medicine.
I want to change the paradigm of healthcare and us paving the way into a new vanguard of medicine. And I'm excited to really bring this into light. There's a company called Cannabis that we're merging with, and we will now be doing global education.
It's about education, it's about empowerment, it's about teaching people how to feel good, bridging the gap from what they're not getting from traditional medicine, utilizing different plant medicines, adaptogens, tips, tricks, hugs, and nugs of information to support and nourish the most important system in our body.
And it's a lot of soul work, a lot of love, a lot of discipline, and meditation. I'm using my life work as a testimony to others to learn how they can be their own hero and then go help heal the world.
And we are, as nurses, the game changers.
Good morning, everyone. Rise and shine. So I'm still on California time. So I had a little bit of a difficult time waking up this morning, but here we are. Peace begins with me. Inhale, Ananda. And I also want to say hello to Kathleen Graham out there. She was supposed to be co-hosting with me this morning, but she lost her internet access. So today we were going to discuss, and we're going to keep discussing. Kathleen has been a hospice nurse. She's been a cannabis nurse for a long time. And so we've been covering the history of hospice and how cannabis could really be beneficial in helping those patients at the end of life really do legacy work and to improve comfort, improve outcomes, just to help patients at the end of life get what they need. So Kathleen's been doing hospice work. I've been doing hospice work for years, and we are going to discuss that in a little bit. But first, what I want to get into is a poem. In the morning, we have different nurses on and we read from angel books and we pull cards. And I just thought I would read a little poem about something that came to me as I was going to discuss today about hospice. So today's poem is actually a poem that was written by someone that was anonymous. I found it online and I couldn't find the origin of the poem. But this literally has to do with death and dying, transformation, energy shift. So today's poem goes like this. If I should go tomorrow, it would never be goodbye, for I have left my heart with you, so don't you ever cry. The love that's deep within me shall reach you from the stars. You feel it from the heavens, and it will heal the scars. So this poem really looks at us upon death, not as a goodbye, but as a transition in how we communicate with our loved ones. So you think about, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It always is, always was, and always will be. It just transmutes into a different form. So Throwback Thursday, I've had Kathleen on for the past few weeks, and we've been talking about end of life and hospice. And so now I want to talk a little bit about a law that passed in California on September 28th, 2021. Governor Gavin Newsom signed a Senate Bill 311, also known as Ryan's Law, to allow terminally ill patients who have valid medical cannabis card under California's Compassionate Use Act to use medical cannabis in a healthcare facility, excluding chemical dependency recovery in state hospitals, which I think needs to be revisited because we all know that cannabinoids can help with chemical dependency and recovery. So Ryan's Law applies only to terminally ill patients defined as individuals diagnosed with a medical condition resulting in a prognosis of life of 1 year or less, if the disease allows or follows its natural course. So Ryan's Law does not apply to any patients receiving services in a facility's emergency department and does not require healthcare facilities to recommend the use of medical cannabis or include medical cannabis in a patient's discharge plan. Healthcare facilities should take, it says, immediate steps to comply, as the law implicitly states that a healthcare facility may not prohibit a patient's use of medical cannabis, even though cannabis is illegal Schedule 1 controlled substance under the federal law. So California's Ryan's Law allows for access to cannabis in hospital and hospice settings without exposing those healthcare providers to funding freezes from the feds. So if you didn't know, this is the ongoing block in the world of regulated cannabis. The federal government still treats cannabis as among the most dangerous drugs known to humankind. Schedule 1, really? So organizations in federally regulated industries like medicine and banking take huge risks if they engage in cannabis-related businesses. So without this bill, 311, Ryan's Law, most hospice providers wouldn't touch the cannabis treatment that has been legal in California since 1996. So provisions include requirements for healthcare facilities to document the use of medical cannabis in a patient's medical record, which we all know should happen. Cannabis is medicine, no matter how you use it, right? It enters into our body and it has a physiological response that does something. So the provisions of Ryan's Law include that healthcare facilities must document. They must develop written guidelines for the proper storage and use of medical cannabis. And they must ensure medical cannabis is stored in a locked container to ensure the safety of hospital employees, other patients, and guests. The other thing that the provision includes in this law is that it prohibits patients from smoking or vaping medical cannabis. And I actually have a little issue with that, but that's something that needs to be re-educated on, and it's progress, not perfection. But the interesting thing too about the law is compliance with the law is not a condition for obtaining, retaining, or renewing a healthcare facility license. Ryan's Law allows healthcare facilities to suspend compliance in limited situations if a federal regulatory agency, the United States Department of Justice, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services takes enforcement action against a healthcare facility, issues a rule that prohibits the use of medical cannabis in a healthcare facility, or prohibits compliance with state-regulated medical cannabis program. So the bill that's known as Ryan's Law was formed after Ryan Bartel, a California native and Coast Guard veteran who died in 2018 after a battle with pancreatic cancer. Bartel was given morphine and fentanyl in his final weeks, leaving him unable to stay awake for family and friends. So what ended up happening was his family ultimately moved Ryan Bartel to another facility that would permit medical cannabis, allowing him a quality of life during his final days. So Jim Bartel, the father, writes, "In this invaluable last days as Ryan fought stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I first-handedly experienced the positive impact medical cannabis had on my son's well-being, as opposed to the harsh effects of opiates. So basically, the dad said, and I don't want to cry, looking at each other, holding Ryan's hand, and telling him how much I loved him during his final moments would not have been possible without medical cannabis. Whew, that's heavy. Whew. And if we know as medical professionals that cannabis can help, we have an obligation to share that information. I've been showing up here for how long? Since 2018, showing up every day, educating on this plant, really teaching people that it is safe, teaching people that they can use it. And, it's just a shame that people are just not getting on the bus. We are in a time of trauma. Everyone is experiencing trauma, and end of life needs to be celebrated just as we are entering life into this world. So you think about when people are coming into this world, babies are coming into this world, we have baby showers, right? And we celebrate. Well, people leaving this earth plane are just going somewhere else. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, and we do have an obligation to take care of these patients. You know, we talk about cannabinoid therapeutics in the conventional system and how it is essential to learn about it because it does bridge the gap from what patients aren't getting from traditional medicines. And that's what we do, Lori. We hold the patient's hands until they're ready to let go. Uh, so I want to share a little story that I think will kind of put light on a lot of this, which might help a little bit for people to see how important it is to allow cannabis to be in hospitals and hospice. So there was a nurse that I helped in 2019. She was a nurse from the Midwest, and she was sent home on hospice on over 40 pharmaceuticals for advanced stage lupus. She wasn't even 40, not even 40 years old. So she had advanced stage lupus. She did everything that the doctors told them to do, and nothing worked. And slowly but surely, she was on over 40 pharmaceuticals. And at one point in time, they said there was nothing that they could do to help her. So she discovered medical cannabis, and she lived, like I said, lived in the Midwest, and the state was illegal. So the state that she lived in, cannabis was not legal at that time. And so she did her own research and found people in the community, the grassroots community, to help her get access to this plant. So let me tell you, registered nurse, under 40 years old, on 40 pharmaceuticals, sent home on hospice. They couldn't do anything to help her. This was back in 2018? So anyways, what ends up happening is she finds the plant and she smokes her way into remission. Okay, think about that. Can you imagine a nurse who knows how to take care of herself, extremely healthy, gets lupus, it progresses to advanced stage lupus. The traditional system doesn't help her, the conventional system. She finds the plant, she goes into remission. So really, really powerful stuff. Well, what ended up happening was, as you all know, cannabis is not the end all be all. Cannabis is one tool in the toolbox. So this particular nurse, because of what happened to her, developed what I would call, and we talked about this yesterday, medical and pharmaceutical trauma. So what does that mean? We talked about that yesterday. It means that people go to the doctors, they get prescriptions, it doesn't work, they prescribe more, there's side effects. There's that whole mental, emotional, spiritual loop of what's wrong with me. They can't find out what's wrong with me. They think I'm crazy. This whole thing, ongoing, the cycle. Well, then all of a sudden, they can't help her anymore. She goes home, she finds the plant. What happens? She's developed PTSD around the traditional conventional system, and then basically was determined to take care of herself at home without going to the doctors. So that can be really, really dangerous for patients as well. So at one particular time with her having the lupus, she needed to be fed. She wasn't able to eat anymore. And so she had a tube feeding that she was utilizing. And basically what happened is it stopped working. And She had her cannabis that she needed where she lived in the Midwest, but she needed to be hospitalized. She needed to go into the hospital to start total parental nutrition. Okay, we all know the endocannabinoid system is the largest neuroregulatory system in our body. It regulates everything. So cannabinoids was the glue that was keeping her together. So when you saw her on paper, all of her lab results, they looked great, but in essence when you saw her in person, she needed help. And so what ended up happening is that she was really very, very fearful that she would not be able to utilize her cannabis when she was in the hospital because it was illegal. And I truly understand that fear because I've been there. So what ended up happening was she flew out to Boston and I invited her to stay to my home. And I've worked in all the big major teaching hospitals in Boston for many, many years. I've done hospice, I've done home care, I've done home infusion. So basically, she needed to either start on tube feeds or she had a PICC line and a portacath, a port, which is the central venous access line to be able to feed, to be able to give large volumes of fluid and things. You need to have this big line. So, anyways, the bottom line is she came to my house. I invited her to stay with me. I was able to use my resources from working in the traditional conventional system in the big teaching hospitals for years to get her hooked up at Boston Medical Center. And we got her an appointment with the gastroenterologist and the endocrinologist and the feeding team to help her get what she needed. She needed to either start on tube feeds or she needed to start on TPN, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. Well, we were able to. She was so afraid to go to the hospital that we talked to the doctor after we had a few visits with the team to do a home start, meaning that she was going to start hydration in home in the home, in my home. I would be taking care of her. She'd be able to use her cannabis, and then we would slowly progress to feeding her, either IV or through her tube. Well, what ended up happening is that there is a thing called refeeding syndrome. And what it is, it's caused by fatal shifts in fluids and electrolytes that sometimes occurs in malnourished patients receiving artificial feeding, whether it's enterally through the gut or parenterally through the vein. So these shifts result from hormonal and metabolic changes that can cause other clinical complications. So a lot of times when people are extremely malnourished, they need to be hospitalized to be able to deal with these situations. So she was in my home using cannabis. We started hydration and she started to have a reaction. So she had a reaction to the hydration. It was just normal saline, which is an isotonic solution. So her body would recognize it as the same. It had some vitamins in it and she wasn't able to tolerate it. So here we are. Now we're going through another trauma response of now she has to go to the hospital. So what I did was I really stepped out of my comfort zone and I brought my patient handbook and we went to the hospital and I said, listen, I'm going to do everything I can to help you to get your cannabis into the hospital. So, of course, green nurse on the go. We go barreling in, and it was actually myself and a couple of other people that were also advocates that helped me to communicate this effectively to the team. So here we are in the emergency room, and we're surrounded by emergency room nurses and doctors and gastroenterologists and the feeding team. And pretty much I brought out my little umbrella here, and my diagram on how I teach on the endocannabinoid system. And this is what I said to them. I just said to them, listen, just because you didn't learn about it doesn't mean that it's not real. We have an obligation as health professionals to bring comfort to people that need it. And I said, but let's look at the science a little bit. And I'm hoping that this will make sense. So this is how I taught them. I said, listen, the endocannabinoid system is the largest neuroregulatory system in our bodies. It regulates all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to do something or not do something. Cannabinoids are the glue that keeps her together. So I said to them, just imagine. I needed to keep it simple because I needed to catch their attention because I really, really wanted her to be able to have her cannabis. So I mentioned to them, just imagine that, this patient's body is this umbrella. And I said, all the spokes of the umbrella are all of her organ systems and her immune system. And all of the fabric pieces that attach to the spokes of the umbrella are her neurotransmitter signaling systems. And I said, like dopamine, serotonin, opioid signaling. Well, God, guess what? The endocannabinoid system helps regulate that. And they sat there scratching their heads. And then I said, well, the endocannabinoid system blankets right on top of all of our other systems. So if you imagine the umbrella is our body, the endocannabinoid system is on top. We have cannabinoid receptors on all of the cell surfaces of our 11 organ systems and immune system. And we have cannabinoid receptors at all of the neurotransmitter signaling junction sites. And then I looked at him and I said, you all ready for the big shoe drop? Well, guess what? We have an endocannabinoid system not because of the cannabis plant, but because we make molecules in our body very similar to the plant. And so that's why it works on so many different conditions. So I told them, I go, the plant makes THC, we make anandamine, and the molecular structure is very similar, and it unlocks that door to the largest neurotransmitter signaling system. THC is not bad. Anandamine, we make. THC, the plant makes. The anandamine molecule is 1/10 the strength of the THC molecule. That's why you don't need a lot. So as I was educating, getting back to my educational platform in the emergency room with this patient, I said to them very blatantly, if someone is not making enough of their own internal endogenous cannabinoids, what happens? Messages don't get where they need to go, and our systems start to dysregulate. And before you know it, our umbrella is not operating as optimally as it could. So I gave them the analogy and I said this. I said, just like the type 1 diabetic needs insulin, the medical cannabis patient needs cannabinoids if they're not producing enough of their own internal endogenous cannabinoids that mimic the plant. So I basically told the emergency room people is you really, really need to reconsider and let her have her cannabis. We can come up with a plan together. Because if you don't let her have her cannabis, things are going to unravel and she will be in the hospital much, much longer than you want. So what we ended up doing is they agreed and we came up with a plan and she kept it stored in a little area that was locked, at her bedside. And when she needed to medicate, they allowed her. They said, well, how often does she need it? Is it twice a day? Is it 3 times a day? Is it 4 times a day? Do we need to put her on a schedule? I said, no. I said, cannabis is just such an amazing plant that once you get to know this plant, you know how to utilize it. And it's different for everyone. So when she needs to use this plant, she'll let you know. And they wanted to know if there was other ways for her to use it. And I said, yes, there's many other ways for her to use it. But because she can't get anything in, she can't consume anything, it makes sense that she's going to utilize cannabinoids via the method of inhalation to get in what she needs to get in. And then eventually we can get back to the tinctures, the capsules, and the other oils that she had been consuming. So inhaling cannabis saved this nurse's life. And when her lupus started to flare up again, she needed to utilize it, but she also needed to go into the hospital. And that's the one of the most important things that, I really want to get across to people. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be conventional medicine and all pharma versus all plant medicine. You can combine them. And so this was a true demonstration of coming together with these health professionals to help this nurse enter into the space of a hospital using her plant, being able to choose with the team what medications that she wanted to use versus those that she didn't want to use. And and it definitely was a struggle. It required a lot of information, a lot of education, and a lot of deep breathing, just saying, you know what, we need to remember at one point in time as nurses, we didn't know about the endocannabinoid system. And so that's where my compassion lies. My compassion lies that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know that I didn't know it. But however, if you are a registered nurse, a medical professional, if you are a health and wellness coach, you do have an obligation to learn about this. I promise you, once you go down that rabbit hole of learning about cannabinoid therapeutics, there's no going back. There's no going back. It will open up your eyes to a whole nother world of plant medicines and how we can take care of patients. So really, really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share that story. And so I advocated for her. And this is what we do as nurses. We're advocates and we're activists, and we will do what it takes to help patients get what they need to improve their quality of life, because it is about living their best life. All right, so let me pull up. Let me say hello. Hello, Lori. Hello, Brian. Hello, Libby. Hi, Eric. Thank you guys all for joining us this morning. If you're out there, please say hello to me. I'm all by myself. I usually have an amazing co-host with me to share the spotlight. And believe it or not, I don't like doing these alone. Even though I can do them alone, I love to have other health professionals and nurses on to dialogue, because I just think it's much more interesting than me here talking by myself. um, so anyways, let me get back to, okay, I hope I brought you all hope and inspiration for growth and healing, right? And I want you all to come and visit us in the network. So the Green Nurse Holistic Caring Network, the community here is free, and it's off social media. It's private, it's uncensored, and all of the podcasts are there. We have a ton of information, patient portal, free patient support group, free monthly webinar. We have a book club. So Elizabeth Mack wrote this book, Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach, right? And everyone will be like, oh, I don't want to become a coach. I go, listen, you need to become your own coach. There's no one more important than you, right? And this book is going to teach you how to take care of yourself, right? The future of healthcare is patient empowerment. And so we're really, really excited for that. And listen, the other thing, if you haven't watched the show last night, I want you to watch the show from last night, and I'll put it up in the comments here. I had on Christy Chapman, who's a respiratory therapist, and it kind of ties into this show. We talked a lot about inhalation, using cannabinoids as a method of using inhalation as a method of utilizing cannabinoids in our body. So it's a really, really good show. She talks about inhalation, she talks about the benefit, and she also talks about a new product that just came out. It's an inhaler. It looks just like an albuterol inhaler. So that show is really good. And she's going to be joining me on Tuesdays. She has a lot of great information, a lot of great stories. She was a professional in the intensive care unit, working as a respiratory care therapist. And so she's going to be joining me on Tuesdays, and we're going to get a lot of great information from her on using inhalation and other types of cannabinoids and how it's helped her and a lot of the other patients that she's worked with. Okay, and to wrap it up, it is Thursday. I hope you all have a fabulous day. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have Green Nurse Denise on with me, which is going to be an amazing show. And this weekend, we are going to the Harvest Cup Judges Party. So I'm honored that I was selected to be judging in the Harvest Cup. The Harvest Cup is an event that's been going on for quite a few years now. It brings community together, vendors, dispensaries, CBD stores, cultivators, extractors, medicine makers, dispensaries, medical professionals. And so it's a really, really great event. And so people that have been, growing cannabis and making medicine have submitted their products to be voted on. And so there's a big group of judges, and I was chosen as one of the judges. I can't tell you what I was chosen to judge yet, but I will be able to share with you after Saturday. So what we're going to do is we're going to be at the Summit Lounge in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston. And the Summit Lounge is a consumption lounge. And I've been there quite a few times. I actually did a few shows there a few years back. So it's going to be really great to be together with the Canna family and to gather and to celebrate the Harvest Cup and turn in our judges' books. The Harvest Cup is actually on November 13th and 14th, the following weekend. And I'll be there with Green Nurse Denise and a few of the other nurses. We're going to be roaming around visiting people. So if you haven't gotten your ticket for that yet, please get that. And I will put that also in the comments. All right, everyone, it has been a fabulous Thursday. If you're out there, please say hello. Please say hello. Please say hello. I love to know who's following, who's watching. And if you have any topics, that's the final thing. If you have any topics that you'd like me to cover, I've got a whole host of nurses that are very, very talented and gifted who have very rich experiences working with this plant. Let us know in the comments what you're interested in, what you would like us to cover on these morning shows. And I'm just going to end it with Remember, everyone, what it's all about. It's about living your best life and helping others do the same. We'll see you tomorrow morning.